This video focuses on social development specifically. So, the one person that we're going to talk about that you really need to be aware of, and that there's kind of a lot that goes into, is Erikson. He calls his stages psychosocial stages. So, that means that he's focused on like social tasks or challenges when we compare that to like Freud, who focused on psychosexual stages. So, just kind of an important term to know. So what you're seeing on the screen right now is like the name of the stage. However, it's important to know about Erikson that these are the end results of the stage. So it's sort of like one of these will exist as part of kind of like your personality or who you are based on how you navigate the stage. So again, at each stage, there's sort of like a challenge you face, and then that will either end in you having maybe a more trusting approach to things or mistrusting, or you'll develop more of an autonomous personality versus a doubtful personality. So we're going to kind of talk through each one, break it down into 4 different parts that just give you a little bit more information. So when you look at the first stage, that's going to be birth to about a year and a half-ish, okay? Think about that. When a baby's born, they have to rely completely on somebody else, right? When they're crying, they're hungry, or you need to change their diaper, or they're sick, right? Like there's only so many things. And so if the adults in their life are really responsive to their needs, like when they cry, they get what they need and things like that, and that's a consistent behavior, then Erikson says at the end of the stage, they will develop a more trusting personality versus having a caregiver that's sort of like unresponsive or unpredictable in meeting the baby's needs. In that sense, they may develop more of like a personality that doesn't really trust others. So as they get older, because again, he's a stage theorist, about a year and a half to 3 years old is when they're in stage 2. So stage 2 is known as autonomy versus shame and doubt, or some people call it self-doubt. So think about what kids are dealing with, and it's the same thing that we talk about in other units. So when we talk about this stage, usually potty training, right, is happening. And so I call this the I can do it myself stage. I remember when my nephew Mason was little, he struggled with potty training a little bit more than my niece Allie. And so my sister would always say, like, okay, if you're going to have Mason up, you have to ask him, or you have to take him to the bathroom every 20 minutes, because if you ask him, he won't go. So he would get really annoyed, right? Because he's like 2 years old, and I would be like, Mason, let's go potty. And he would get really annoyed, and we would go, and he would sit on the toilet forever and whatever, right? So I remember one day he came up, and I said, all right, Mason, let's go to the bathroom. And we got to the bathroom door, and he turned around, and he put his hand up, and he said, I can do it myself. And I was like, okay. And so I like left the door open because I'm like, oh my God, what's going to happen here? He's going to pee everywhere. And I always had like a stool for the kids. So I remember he got on the stool, he turned around backwards facing the toilet, kneeled on the toilet, put his hands in the air, and peed right into the toilet bowl. I was like, oh my God, that's amazing. You absolutely can do it yourself. So, in this sense, like as Mason or as kids learn to gain control over their bodies, if that goes pretty well, and if we don't make them feel terrible about that, like for Mason, I think potty training took a little bit longer. He was probably like 3 when that happened. So as they gain that control and things go pretty well, they're going to gain a sense of like, I got this, I can do this myself, or they're going to start to feel bad about it. They're going to start to wonder like, I don't know. I don't know if I can do things myself. And that would be that shame and doubt. The next stage, which is stage 3, is 3 to about 6 years old. This one's called initiative versus guilt. So this is the stage that most people are completely annoyed by. So whether you're a sibling or a babysitter or a parent, I call this the why stage. So this is the stage where kids are asking so many questions, and all you want to do is yell, stop asking questions. So in this being the why stage, what's kind of cool about this is kids are so curious. They're asking lots of questions to try to like understand the world around them. So this one makes me think of my niece Presley, who's actually kind of at the end of this stage. She's 6 now. But in the last year, she started asking a lot of questions, like so many questions. And my sister's super patient with her. But I egg it on. When Presley asks me a question, I don't know the answer. So I don't say like, I don't know. Or I don't say stop asking questions, or I don't make up an answer like why is the sky blue because it reflects the water, right? Like there's all these ridiculous things that parents usually say to their kids just to give an answer. So I don't give an answer, I ask a question back, right? Um, like, hey Aunt Sarah, why is snow falling from the sky? And I'll be like, I don't know, Presley. Like, do you think it's really cold out? And then she'll be like, I do think it's really cold out. Why is snow sometimes sticky? And then I'm like, I don't know, Presley. Why is rain always so wet? And so, like, we just go back and forth and probably completely annoy the people around us. But I just kind of egg it on because that's her asking these questions. And what it's actually showing is like really cool cognitive growth. And she's interacting socially to ask those questions. So as long as I am able to, and my sister and all the people in her life are able to encourage her asking those questions, encourage her trying to figure out the world around her, again, Erikson would say that that would kind of like enhance her ability or willingness to take initiative. All right. Now, if I make her feel bad, or if I yell consistently, stop asking questions, or like her parents do that, or her teachers are doing that, or whatever, then she might start to feel guilty about asking questions. And then I think about like the seniors that are listening to this video right now. And like, at what point did you stop asking questions, right? There's so many aspects to education that fascinate me. When kids are younger, their hands are in the air, they can barely sit in their seats. And by the time you guys are sitting in front of us, you're probably struggling to stay awake right now, right? And so what are the interactions that you had along the way that kind of just sort of like beat that initiative out of you, okay? The last stage in this one then, and then we're going to kind of pause, is stage 4, which is industry versus inferiority. Now, some people call this competence versus inferiority. This stage is from 6 to 12. And what I really think is interesting about this stage is, for the most part, it's the first time that kids are in actual school, like actual classrooms, where they're completing work and turning it in. So really think about this. Prior to the age of 6, you could draw something or you could sing, and people would tell you, you are the best artist in the world. You are the best singer. Oh my gosh, you're so smart. Look at you. You're so pretty. You're so whatever, so talented. Well, for the most part, you've been surrounded by people who love you and have been building you up. When you go to school, what starts to happen is you're comparing yourself to everyone else, right? So when you turn something in and it's not the best, or a teacher tells you like, oh, this is pretty good, but you got these ones wrong. And you're looking at other people's papers and you're like, what is this? Why does my paper have red all over it? And theirs doesn't have red all over it. You're starting to be like, wait a minute, am I not literally the best at everything? And so that's a thing that kids tend to really struggle with. And again, 6 to 12 is kind of a big gap, right? So think about that. In math class, if you're constantly getting things wrong in math class and you're not getting like a lot of feedback from a teacher or something, what does that do to you as you look around? Does that make you try less in math class? Does that make you think things like, I can't do math? And then by the age of 12, you've decided that you can't do math, right? So as you think about those things, depending on how you navigated this stage, depending on like what you internalized, you will either develop a sense of competence or a sense of inferiority. Inferiority just means you feel less than. You feel like you can't really compete or compare to some of the people around you. So what I would recommend is kind of pausing right now. And I tried to use people in my life just in case, but what I'd like you guys to do is pause and try to think of other examples in small groups where you're able to come up with other people or other instances that represent these stages. It could be when you were little. If you have siblings, it could be a younger sibling, a cousin, somebody you babysit for, a movie you've seen, a TV show you've watched, whatever works for you to help try to personalize these stages. So the next 4 stages are going to be a little bit more familiar to you. Stage 5 is identity versus role confusion. This is the stage that you are in. Your only job during adolescence, which is actually deemed puberty until age 20, is to figure out who you are. So this is the who am I question. So if you took social psych, we spent a quarter trying to answer the question, who am I, and look at all the aspects of that. Think about this, you guys. If you don't do the work of figuring out who you are during this stage, apart from everyone else in your life, then what do you have to offer other people? Might that end up in role confusion where you're like, I'm not really sure who I am. I'm not really sure what I believe. I'm not really sure what I want, right? And a lot of you might be feeling that right now, right? People are asking you really big questions like, what's your plan after high school? Where are you going? What college? Are you going to college? Are you not going to college? What do you want to be when you grow up? What's your major? Like, holy crap, that was a lot, right? So for some of us, even as adults, we're not really sure what we want to be when we grow up. So there's a lot of pressure on you to figure out and do the work of answering those questions. If you do it well, you'll come into your 20s with a strong sense of your identity, which really doesn't make life that much easier, but it gives you a good foundation, or with confusion. Remember, all of the work you do is apart from parents, guardians, or friends. It's apart from the location you grew up in, right? What do you truly believe and why? And that's a really difficult thing to figure out. Stage 6 is age 20 to 40, which feels a little bit crazy. It's called early adulthood. And in early adulthood, your challenge is to make sure that you have intimate relationships with others. As a reminder, in psychology, intimacy is not sex. Intimacy is emotional closeness, having trusting, valuable relationships with others. And again, that could be also your romantic relationships, right? Because intimacy is an important part of that. So once you figure out who you are, your job is to surround yourself with like really great people, the people that hopefully are deserving of being in your life and of having you in their life. So the idea here is from 20 to 40, you want to make sure that you have that support system and you feel connected. If you do, you'll develop a sense of intimacy, and if you don't, you'll feel isolated. As you enter into stage 7, this is called middle adulthood. Middle adulthood is age 40 to 60. Again, I really think that with Erikson, these ages would change today because age and how long we live and all of that stuff has completely changed. But for your purposes, it's 40 to 60 is middle adulthood. So during this time, you need to feel like you have connected to more than just yourself. So you need to feel like you've contributed to society in some way. You've had meaningful connection. Now, some people do this by having kids, so they feel like they've raised productive members of society or they're contributing in that way. Other people do it through their jobs, meaning like not like a self-focused type of job, but something where you feel like you're giving back to others. You're leaving a mark. You feel valuable in terms of your contributions. Some people do it through volunteering their time, okay? But it's really important to feel connected beyond just you. And so if you do, you will develop a sense of generativity. And if you don't, you will feel a sense of stagnation, which just means you're stuck. You start to realize that you're kind of like overly self-absorbed. You're kind of only focused on you. You're not connected to anything greater. As you transition into the last stage, which is late adulthood, this is 60 until death, which again, with people living longer today, for some people that could be like a 40-year span, right? But in old age, as you start to get older and realize you're getting older, you actually look back on the rest of your life. So for stage 8 to go well, everything that came before it has to be things that kind of like filled your bucket, crossed off your list of things you wanted to do. Again, you've tried different things, whatever it is that makes you look back on your life and say, yeah, I did that thing. Like that went well, okay? If so, then you will age and die with integrity, which means you won't be as fearful of getting older. You won't be as fearful typically of like death or dying because you look back and you say, yeah, I had a pretty good life. Now, for those that don't, they start to kind of cling, okay? Like cling to every minute, cling to every ailment, try to make sure they have more time. So the idea is, in this sense, you're aging and dying with despair, with looking back on your life and wondering, like, did I take advantage of the time that I had? All right. Now, remember, Erikson is just one theory of social development, but he is the main theory that we need to know about in AP psychology. Again, what I would do is take time and try to come up with examples of people that are in those stages.